Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Get Your Greek On. My name is Rob and today I'm going to be talking to Zoe and Ellen all about the ancient Greeks and their clothes. So a quick question to start with. If you were living in the time of the ancient Greeks, you wake up in the morning, you look in your wardrobe, what are you traditionally going to be wearing? What are you putting on in the morning?
My guess is like a toga, some sort of bedsheety material.
Yeah, that's what I think as well. Some kind of take a bedsheet but make it glam.
Maybe like a
Okay.
ivy headband as well.
Yeah.
Ancient Greek civilians typically wore two pieces of clothing draped about the body. An undergarment called a chiton or a peplos, which was a tunic, or a cloak, which was called a himation or a chlamys. If you look at the woman in the green here, the chiton is the navy blue underneath her, and the himation is the green. Is a chiton? Well, a chiton is a simple tunic garment of a lighter linen, which was usually pleated and worn by all ages. You think of the conditions in Greece, really pretty hot. So they would kind of wear all this light stuff so that they wouldn't be hot themselves. And despite the length of the chitons, which would tend to fall to the ankles, shorter ones were worn during vigorous activities by athletes and warriors. So hence, in Gladiator, you see Maximus wearing a shorter one.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius.
Which was useful for more movement. Peplos was simply just a square piece of cloth worn by the women, which typically went over the chiton, but could also be worn on its own. A himation was a simple outer garment, which was worn over the peplos, and it passed under your left arm and was secured at the right shoulder. And a himation with more volume was worn in cold weather, and also it could be pulled over the head when anyone was overcome by emotion or shame. We would, for example, you compare it to a hoodie. Put your hood up if you're sad, if you're emotional, you don't want anyone to talk to you down the street, so you just put your hood up, close away, and that's that. So I guess that was kind of the purpose for that. And chlamys was simply just a woolen cloak worn by men for hunting purposes or used in the military, and was secured by a brooch. And now this was the typical attire for the Greek military from the 5th to the 3rd sort, and the female was the male would wear the chlamys, the female would wear the peplos. Ancient Greek clothing was mainly based on necessity, function, materials, and protection rather than identity. All clothes were homemade, sourced from rectangular linen or wool fabric, and was secured with pins or a belt. Now, a fibula was a traditional Greek pin, like we would call a safety pin. Now, first fun fact of the PowerPoint. Ancient Greeks didn't start sewing or making any clothes until the 4th century. They were pretty darn lazy.
I do so, but I really feel like I'm busy that day.
Well, priorities. I wish I could go outside in my bedsheet.
So what has any of this got to do with status and identity? Well, common clothing at the time was plain white or neutral coloured, which sometimes incorporated a decorative border. There is evidence of bright colours and a more creative design, but these were less common among the lower class. However, dyed clothing was more expensive. Now, what was the most expensive colour?
I feel like it would be a bright colour, or like not bright, but colour with lots of pigment, maybe like a red or a purple.
I would say maybe blue, because I think blue's not a natural colour.
Okay, well, Ellen, you've smashed it on the head there. It is in fact purple, because it was the most expensive dye to get a hold of. Now, why do you think it was such an expensive thing to get hold of? Where did they get this dye from?
Maybe a rare flower or a fruit
Or an animal?
a fish, maybe
Like
like
scales.
You're on the right lines. It actually came from snails. In particular, the type of snail was called a marine snail. These were collected by the thousands. They weren't purple to begin with. If you look closely on the little white swirl that's there, there's almost kind of a tinge of purple lingering there. Now, they would get the purple, so they would boil these snails for days. They would take the chemicals and the mucus out of them, and the mucus and the chemicals made this dye. Second fun fact of this was that the shade of purple that was made was called Tyrian purple, and that is what Tyrian purple looked like. How is all of this used in theatre, you ask? Well, chitons worn by actors differed from the ones that were worn in everyday life because these incorporated short and long sleeves. In particular, long white sleeves were worn by the male actors who were playing female roles. This was because in ancient vase paintings, females are usually painted with lighter skin. Men were depicting women. They wore body stockings with a progestata and a prostinada to make their bodies appear more feminine. Now, apparently, it was kind of like a corset, but split into two.
I love how all these people, like the ancient Greeks and Shakespeare, went to so much effort to
Right,
make
go
it
on.
look like women were on stage when they could have just had women on stage.
When you put it like that.
Yeah, costumes help to indicate the social status, gender, and age of a character. So again, we go back to social status. If you wore more colours, you were signified as richer, whereas if you wore white, neutral coloured, you would be seen as lower colour. Now, tragic actors typically wore buskins, which were raised platform shoes to symbolise superior status, while comic actors wore white socks. So shoes. Around the time of Aeschylus, the boots or buskins worn by actors were flat. This was because actors had the same status as the chorus. So during the 3rd century, actors were raised to the status of heroes and platform soles began to be used. Raised soles may have also induced a stylized way of walking, which would have been suited to the rhythm of tragic verse.
So like the sound that they made with their feet kind of matched the rhythm of what they were speaking.
Masks. We're now going to touch on masks. Masks served several important purposes in ancient Greek theatre. Do you know any of those?
I know that the Greek choruses would often wear them.
Their exaggerated expression helped define characters portrayed by the actors. It allowed the actors to play more than one role or gender. So, for example, the three of us could be in a 3-person show, and it could have 12 characters in it, and we could play up to as many masks as possible just by taking one off and putting one on, and taking one off and putting it off. And it helped the audience in the distant seats see by projecting sound somewhat like a small megaphone or a mouth trumpet. Now, if you look at the masks, all their mouths are wide open. So if you think about a trumpet, the end of a trumpet that you blow into is quite small, and the end of a trumpet is really big and massive, and that's what projects the kind of sound. Same with a megaphone. Now, this was used on the stage, so your mouth was the inside of the trumpet and the mask was the outside, and that mask actually helped the sound travel to the back of the audience so that they could hear you.
That's clever.
Praying. So now you're probably wondering what on earth praying has to do with any of this. So, tragic actors were more heavily disguised than others. This was due to a religious purpose in which actors give up their identity in order to let another speak and act through them. Dramas were performed in honor of Dionysus, the god of ecstasy, and when they were performing it meant that they were standing outside of oneself. The actors thought the mask itself contained the character, so had to renounce their individuality and are said to have prayed before putting their masks on.
It's all a bit method, isn't it?
Literally becoming their character.
Talk about embodiment.
Yeah.
All right, so finally, I have a quiz. I have a quick fire quiz. It wouldn't be a presentation led by me if there wasn't a quiz involved. So have like some cool kind of quiz music or time or whatever in the background. That would be cool. So, are we ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
What was the name of the traditional Greek pin that was used to hold their clothes up?
Come with an F.
It does, yes. It's the name of a bone of
Fibula.
It sounds like a bone of
Fibula. We said it was so
Fibula. In what century did the Greeks start sewing and making clothes?
Fourth. You
Correct.
said at
Fourth.
the same
Correct.
time.
What was the most expensive shade of purple called?
Tyrian.
Tyrian. Smashing it, all right. If you are a comic actor in Greek theatre, what would you be wearing?
White socks.
Yeah, that one. I didn't say that.
Ancient vase paintings, females are usually painted with what?
Lighter skin.
Correct, lighter skin. And name me one important purpose of a Greek mask.
Trumpet. Like to project with the trumpet device.
Mouth trumpet.
Mouth trumpet.
mouth trumpet. What number episode of Get Your Greek On is this?
5.
Yes, it is. That was great. I loved that. Thanks, Rob.
It's okay, no worries.